The Ruthless Aggression era for some people is their favorite era in WWE, but were there any superstars you thought should have been more? I decided to find 3 WWE superstars from the mid-2000s that I wondered what if this happened instead, and furthered some stories that may have been nicked or just fell flat due to things behind the scenes. Mark Jindrak went on to become a mainstay in Mexico with companies like CMLL and AAA, but before that he was the protege of Kurt Angle alongside Luther Reigns. However, the biggest role Jindrak could have had was lost due to chemistry issues and his immaturity at that time, Evolution. Jindrak was tested for the role when Batista got injured, only for things to obviously take a different turn. So what if Jindrak actually stayed in Evolution? The role of Ric Flair's tag team partner doesn't change, but the difference in intensity between Jindrak and Batista is definitely glaring. What Mark did possess, however, was strength and athleticism at a pretty tall stature himself, so the potential of 2 big single stars coming out of the group would still be in play. Triple H ends up with a completely different matchup at WrestleMania 21 and beyond, a match with a strong yet agile adversary that would be a polar opposite to SmackDown's John Cena. The Undertaker would get a more complete version of Jindrak post-draft instead of the semi-inexperienced version he saw in the real timeline. Based off what he turned out to be, I can only imagine if someone looked out for Jindrak how someone looked out for Orton. We could have got a completely different scene for Raw and SmackDown. Just like I mentioned before, Reigns and Jindrak were aligned with Kurt Angle, and something stood out about Reigns when he got promo time. The character became an assistant after spending time behind bars, and honestly, he wasn't too bad mic-wise. Had a good finisher as well. Reigns asked for his release in 2005, but what if Reigns stayed in 2005? Seeing how things turned out in real life, Reigns had a different direction he saw for himself. In this universe, however, he gets drafted to Raw. Reigns goes into a pretty loaded locker room with the likes of Edge, Triple H, and Kane being some of the notable names. Based off prior interactions with The Undertaker, Luther sets his sights on Kane. Different to Taker, Reigns manages to get the upper hand on Kane with the help of Snitsky. After some time has passed and the pairing splits, Reigns could move into the mid-card as a dominant Intercontinental Champion, matches with Shelton Benjamin and Carlito further cementing his status, leading up to an altercation with John Cena. Now, I'm not saying a guy like Edge or Orton don't eventually move into the scene, but Reigns, I think, had a decent amount of character work to be a credible heel rising alongside them. Quite possibly the biggest what if in wrestling history is Sean O'Haire. O'Haire, while having a very promising career, battled some of his toughest opponents out of the ring, which would ultimately lead to his unfortunate passing. Going back to 2003, he debuted a Devil's Advocate gimmick, which would be fairly intriguing until his alliance with Roddy Piper really set things in motion. With wins over Rikishi, Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero, it seemed like the partnership was benefiting into wins. Going into 2004, where SmackDown's main event scene was fairly open after the release of Piper, taking another swing at the Devil's Advocate gimmick could have restored some of the prior momentum he had. Feuds with Big Show and John Cena, while also being in an alliance of sorts with JBL or even Kurt Angle, could have definitely boosted his stock in the company. Although this is a fairly tough one to fully assess, the talent Sean carried was something I think everyone wished had been capitalized on while he was here, while the idea of what could have been looms overhead years later. That's it for today's video. Comment down below what you think about the names listed. Who do you think should have been a bigger star from the Ruthless Aggression era? Subscribe if you're new, leave a like if you enjoyed, and I will see you all on the next one.